Hello friends, welcome to JavaEE EJB JPA tutorial. So this is the final part of the video, JPA entity create, read, update, delete actions. So in this video we will implement the stateless session bean and see how the entity changes occurs and how we perform create, read and update, delete action. So we started this sub-series with entity states, and we learned about entity states: new, managed, marked for delete and detached states. Then we looked at the CRUD sequence and how the state changes occurs, and we learned the states in relation to the operation sequence. After that, we created our remote interface and we provided dummy implementation. In this video, we are going to replace this dummy implementation with the CRUD operations. So this is for update. This one is also for update, and this is for delete. In all the case, we perform read as well. Create, we already have a function and we haven't touched that, but here in this video we will learn about the create as well. Next, we created the HTML forms for creating the account, for transacting the account, then to close the account. Next, we created the servlet for all the forms. So first we created a create account servlet that talks with, or that will process the saving account creation form. Then we have account transaction. With this servlet will talk with the withdraw as well as a deposit transactions form. Then we created a servlet for a close account. In the previous video, we created a JSP file that will send response to the browser. So here we previously returned -1, right? Now we started implementing it. So the code snippet 40B that was initially returned, and we returned -1. Now we are replacing that code. And first, if you see, this is savings account, this is our entity, and from entity manager is in the bean. We used it with the @entitymanager. When we go to the code, we will see that here it's a entity manager instance. So first, if you see, we are making use of entitymanager.find method, and here we are sending the runtime information for our entity, saving account.class. Then we are passing the personal banking ID, so that is coming here as a parameter. So this data is carried out to this stage. So this is actually the bean implementation, and from HTML form this data is flowing till to this stateless session bean. So for EntityManager.find method, we are giving this banking ID. So what this EntityManager will do, it will go to the database and it will scan the records. And since this personal banking ID is a unique key field, if banking ID is X, it will find a row and it will pick that row. Not only that, it will transform that row into an entity. So this is our entity, right? Java class. So the record is transformed into an entity. Since it's a key field, it will return only one record. So then there will be only one entity here. So here we found that entity and we are storing the reference for that entity in the savings account. So at this stage, the transaction state moved to managed state. Why? Because there will be a record, an entity is there and corresponding record also there. So at this stage it's in the managed state. So that's what we talked about in the beginning of the sub-series. So when we perform the update, first we will go for find. The entity will move into the managed state. Then if you see, we are making call to our deposit method. So this deposit method is on our entity manager, and we know what this deposit will do. The entity will hold all the fields, right? One is a person ID, another one is a person name, the third one is a balance. Deposit will modify this particular field. That means it will increment that field, and here the state is changed. So here in the find, if you see, the entity is in managed state, we will call this A, and after the call to this method, the state of entity got changed. That means the balance is changed. If it is X, the balance will be, now here we are receiving amount, right? That amount we are passing to our entity, and entity will make it as X plus the parameter 2. So that's how we change the balance. So now entity manager, before ending this method, it will commit the transaction. So when it commit the transaction, it will fire an update statement here. So that means before returning, the entity manager, which is sitting on top of this stateless session bean, watching each and every state changes, or which is housekeeping this entity, will fire an update statement. Why? Because the entity is managed state. Here after the find method, the entity is in managed state and the field got changed because of B. That means because of this deposit method, and here the method is returning. We can call this as a business method, and this business method is returning. So when business method is returning, entity manager, this EM will perform an update statement in the underlying database. So entity manager is tagged with the persistent unit, and the persistent unit is available in the persistence.xml, and it knows where is the database, where is the table, because in the table, in the entity itself, we specify @table and column, all those mappings are there. Connection details are available in the persistence.xml file, and it's not a big deal for the entity manager to fire an update statement. It knows what column in what table, what column got changed, and where is the database. It finds that from the persistence.xml and fires an update statement. So here if you see, the key point here is find, and then inside this deposit method we will modify a particular field. So there is a getter and setter method for each and every field, right? Getter and setter for ID, getter and setter for person name, getter and setter for balance. So the deposit will make use of either setter method, or since it is an internal member, it will increment this balance. And once we come here, update statement will be fired to update the balance field. Alright, now update action, and here is the withdraw money we are implementing. So same goes here. Once we find the entity, it will be in the managed state. Field update is taking place here. Here transaction commit will take place. So when transaction commit take place, it knows that withdraw, that means we have a 3-field table, right? In that balance is modified. That means balance is reduced. So minus operation, balance is reduced, withdraw. Here commit action will fire an update statement. So after this update, the saving account, this is our entity, right? It goes to detached state. So this is after the commit, detached state. That's why here if you see, we return integer only. Suppose if we return the saving account itself to the caller, and the caller, if they modify some field, nothing happens. Why? Because the entity is detached here. Because entity manager is hooked to this stateless session bin, and during the commit it will make the entity as detached. So even if you return it to the caller or some other portion of the application, servlet, JSP, wherever you are returning it, it will be in detached state. So if the caller is making change in the detached state, nothing reflects back in the database. Next, we are going with the close saving account function, and it just receives only one parameter, banking ID, because that's the key field, and find the account and delete the record. Here if you see, we are making use of EntityManager.remove. So in the previous two functions, we just did the field update on the entity manager, but here we are explicitly calling the remove method. So first what we will do, we will find the savings account as usual. We are giving a key field to the entity manager's find method. Also we send the EntityManager.class, the instance we are sending it. Now the entity manager knows from this class definition, it knows what is the table and what is the columns associated to the table and what is the key field here. So it finds the unique record and transforms that to an entity Java class instance. Then we are checking if saving account not equal to null. That means if entity is not found, that means the entity manager will do a scan, right, based on the account personal ID. Here let's say our database contains only 1, 2, 3, and if incoming parameter is some 16, we won't find this record in our table. So the savings account will be null because it doesn't find anything. So if that is the case, here if you see, if it is not null in the sense we found the record, that means say for example if user is sending 2, then we will find that record and we have a valid entity. So here we are making call to EntityManager.remove and we are sending the record which is found here. That's what we are passing here. So here em.remove, it won't remove immediately, but it will mark it as removed. That means we know about the entity states, right? Entity states new, managed, removed, and detached. So here the state change will be removed, or some people will call this as marked for delete as also. Alright, then here we are returning true because the function is return value is boolean. True means we are stating that we actually found a record and the record is removed by the entity manager. So in the else portion we are simply returning the default false. So that means if the function returns false, the entity is not found. So that's all here. And if you see, when entity is found, that means this is the find method, right? And if we actually find the entity, then we are asking to remove it, and this will make the state change, or it will mark this record as removed or entity as removed, not record. The entity is marked as removed. Here actually the transaction commit takes place. When commit takes place, it knows that there is a entity that is marked as removed. That means entity manager will fire a delete statement on the underlying database. Alright, now it is a demo time. We will implement our stateless session bean to perform all these actions. Also, we will run the application and see how it works. So here we are starting our workspace. So first we will go to our EJB bean, EJB module, stateless bean, saving account bean. So if you see here, we already have the create account. The create account, if you see, we are making call to EntityManager.persist. This one we saw as part of the subseries 3. Now we are in subseries 4. Now we will perform the deposit money function. So as usual, you can check for the code in the video description. So the code was already explained in the slide. Let's go to deposit, and this will move to our JPA entity class. So at this moment we have only one entity, saving account .java, and here if you see, there are 3 members, right? Mapped members: balance, person name, and PID. So as part of subseries 3, we talked about the entity saving account and the annotations, table, column, ID, generated value, all the stuff. And as part of the subseries 3 itself, we implemented this deposit and withdraw member functions. So deposit, if you see, whatever is the incoming parameter, it adds the balance with this incoming parameter. Here we are negating the balance. So the balance is a managed field and it is mapped to a database column balance, right? Now let's come back here, and if you see saving account, once we find the entity, in the sense we will get the instance of this savings account, and we are making call to deposit amount we are passing, and we know what happens. So now we will go with the withdraw. Here in the withdraw, if you see, we are doing the same process. We are finding the entity using entitymanager.find, then we are making call to withdraw. Finally, we will implement our close account. So since all these are explained in the slide, we just placed the code. Now we will start the server. Here the server is in stopped state. First we will add our component, then we will start the server. It may take some time, so I'm not going to pause the video since it will be live, and if it takes some time, most probably it may take same amount of time in your side also. Of course, there may be some variation depending on the machine speed, all those stuff, but it will give you a good picture of how much time relatively it will take. So it shows the server is started and the EJB jar also synchronized. Now we will go to our home page. So home page will be available here in the web, right? Dynamic web project. We will go to web content and choose saving AC homepage. So here I'm choosing run on server. So this will take some time. In the meantime, I will open the Explorer instance. So I'm copying this. So in our database, as part of a previous tutorial, we have two records. Previous tutorial in the sense, previous subseries. As part of subseries 3, we created these two records. Now we will try to create one more. So here I'm submitting it. So we haven't validated anything, that's why we saw that error. Now other mon, and there should be an integer. So initial amount we will keep it as 800 and we will submit it now. So account ID is 4. That means previously we maybe created one more record and we deleted it. So it's a running sequence. Now it created 4. Suppose if we delete it and add one more record, the sequence will be 5. It won't look at the maximum of this account ID and create one more record with 3. So once the ID is used, the seed will go to the next one. Alright, you can see a record is created. Now we'll go to our home page. This time we will go for the deposit and we will choose account number 2. Here First we will provide the account ID 2. Then we will place the amount. Here I am placing amount 200. Here if you see, we will place 30 so that it will get negated and the person will hold 1000. So it shows you withdrawn money, new account balance is 1000, and you can see the database also updated accordingly. Now Raman number is having an amount of 1000. Now we will put 30 for James and the son. Account ID is 1. So this time I'm choosing a deposit. So here if you see deposit, that's why it gives a confusion. When we choose withdraw, it should display only the withdraw. That will be nice. Or instead of deposit withdraw, we should have put a link for transact account. Anyhow, we will go for a deposit. Account ID is 1. This time I'm depositing amount 30 and new account balance is 1200. Previously it's 170, right? If I execute it, I can see 1200. Now we will delete this fourth record. Here I'm choosing 4 and I'm submitting it, and you can see account removed. Home page, and we will check this also. So record 4 is gone. Now we'll go for delete saving account, and this time we will give record number 56 and submit. It will say account not found. So that's all. So this is for our number format exception. When we created the record for Abdul Rahman, we put Abdul on the name field, Rahman in the amount field, and in the console window you are seeing that error. Alright, now we will go ahead and remove this. This will perform a undeploy operation. So we see undeployed EJB EAR. Now we will stop our server. That's all, server stopped and I am quitting it. So this concludes our subseries, and in this video, in this subseries, you learned about the entity states and how entity states plays important role on the CRUD operation. So we saw how the EntityManager.persist method was used while creating the new record. Then we also saw how we used the find method on the withdraw and deposit before the update. After that we saw how we used the delete also. Thank you for watching. Bye.